IE. Go to Teamsters1932.org for more information.
Located in the heart of San Bernardino, California, the Teamsters Local 1932 Training Center is designed to train workers for high-demand, good-paying jobs in various industries throughout the Inland Empire. If you want a pathway to a high-paying job and the respect that comes with a union contract, visit 1932trainingcenter.org to enroll today. That's 1932trainingcenter.org. Are you looking for a good union job? The Inland Empire's 14,000 member strong Teamsters Local 1932 has opened a training center to get working people trained and placed in open positions in public service clerical work and in jobs in the logistics industry. This is a new opportunity to advance your career and raise standards across the region. Visit 1932trainingcenter.org to enroll today. That's 1932trainingcenter.org. Are you graduating high school soon and wondering what to do next? College is one option, but why not consider the high-paying jobs made possible by union power? Labor Union Teamsters Local 1932 has opened a training center to get you into the high school to high-paying job pipeline. You'll learn all the skills needed to excel in opportunities across industries. Visit 1932trainingcenter.org to enroll today. That's 1932trainingcenter.org.
I'm Rick Smith, host of The Rick Smith Show, inviting you to listen to my show during the noon hour every weekday right here on KCAA. My show is sponsored locally by Teamsters 1932, a strong union with 14,000 members in the IE. Our message is clear. Unions improve the lives of working people. You have a right to form and join a union, so go to Teamsters1932.org and get started now.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Oh, I love our corporate-controlled mainstream media, leading off with the, most Democrats want someone other than Biden to run. You go, no. This is where you got to stop this. And Democrats, if that's true, stop it. Stop it. The majority of Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents want the party to replace Joe Biden in 2024. I don't care if you replace him or not. Just keep the policies. Keep the direction we're going. Stop with the nonsense. Stop with this. Stop it. And I'll tell you, the approval ratings highest it's been, highest point this year, which means people are, I think, coming around to the reality, moving in the right direction. Today, the president was talking about, hey, how are we going to help middle-class folks? And the important line for me anyway, I know everyone was on the, capitalism without competition isn't capitalism, it's exploitation, that line. Good line, true, good line. But the most important line in there is, my focus is on working class and middle class folks. They're the ones who get hurt the most. There is a guy sitting in the White House who gives a rat's behind about Joe Sixpack, who cares about the ham and eggers, the people who show up, punch the clock, do the work, that nobody remembers their name. There's a guy sitting in the White House who cares about those people, even if they don't care about him. This is the monumental moment where we got to wake up, because we're at a very important moment in history. Very important moment. This is a crossroads moment. Because what Biden is doing is moving us off what has been built over the last 40 years. the whole supply side voodoo Reaganomics, all the neoliberalism, moving it now slowly, but moving us away from that and moving us back in a direction that helped build the most prosperous working class in history, helping to reshore manufacturing, helping to invest in the future of this country, and helping working people to share in it. I've been having tons of conversations with people here over the last several days as we plan for our Working Class Heroes tour. And I keep coming back to this conversation with people about, the golden age of the working class for America, the golden age of of America. What people think back to as, when the country was great. And they always come back to that post-World War II era, my grandparents' generation. That greatest generation that fought the war, came home and fought the boss, and built the most prosperous working class in history, in the history of civilization, not just our country, in the history of civilization, where workers had a fair shot, shared in the wealth that their labor created. And how did they do it? Well, they did it through extraordinarily strong unions, which meant working people were standing together, not eating each other. And they did it through voting for people who invested in them and their communities. The reason the 50s and 60s were so great, if you will, is because we had incredible investment from government, smart investment, roads and bridges and healthcare and education and things to make us better. And how do we pay for it? Well, we paid for it by taxing the hell out of rich people. And when I tell folks, you go, well, we're taxed enough already now. No, we're not. Or at least our rich people aren't. But you go back to that era where we think of as the great era, the Leave It to Beaver, Mayberry kind of Norman Rockwell era. Tax rates on the very wealthy were through the roof. And we need to go back to that. We need to return to that era. In fact, the top marginal tax rate in 1953 was 92%. Corporate tax rates were 56%. We used that money to invest in the future. It was a three-legged stool. High taxes on the very wealthy, redistributed into investments in our future, in our country, in our infrastructure and education and healthcare, and strong unions to demand a share of the profits that their labor created. And over these last 40, 50 years, those three legs, well, they've been whittled down to barely pencils. And the sad reality is we've been sold this false bill of goods for so long that, we could all be, pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and we're all going to be self-made millionaires, when the reality is most working people are just getting the short end of the stick. So when Biden says capitalism without competition isn't capitalism, it's exploitation, he's right. It is. And thank goodness there's someone in the White House who gives a tinker's damn about the average working person. Now, the event today, talking about, hey, how are we going to crack down on all of the fees and all of the... How are we going to crack down on how the economy has Mitt Romneyed us to death? Mitt Romney was governor of Massachusetts, ran around for a long time saying, I never raised taxes, but raised fees on working people more than 500 times. So every time you went to get a driver's license, a fishing license, a hunting license, a license for this, for that, whatever, you got taxed. You did, the working people. People like him, they walked away scot-free. So what Biden is doing is saying, look, all these nickel and dime fees you get with airlines or banks or any of this stuff, it's time there's some transparency. It's time we start bringing this stuff out into the light. And what they pointed out is, and this is just a mind-blowing number, just baggage fees alone last year, just you needing to get your luggage from one place to the other, the airline industry made $5.3 billion. Just that. They made $700 million in cancellation and changes. $700 million bucks. because it's amazing. It's amazing how in the real small print, way down at the bottom, and in print that you need a magnifying glass to read, they put all the details. Now, of course, the lobby group for the airline industry says, well, we're doing the transparency. It's the taxes, because again, you got to get people foaming at the mouth over taxes, because taxes, that's the problem. Again, distraction. Now, the Biden event today, again, talking about how are we going to help working class people. Did we have that in the last administration? Yeah, we had a lot of talk, not much in the way of action. And this is why I'm thrilled to have Biden in the White House right now. And I've said it a bunch of times. Wasn't my first choice. Was not. But doing the work. In fact, he's also come out and said that they're moving towards having the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, requiring internet service providers. Have you looked at your internet bill? Lots of charges. You go, what's that? Well, it's time we bring that stuff out into the light. Also, there's going to be some money to help, some grants to help small meat processors to enter into producing our nation's meat supply. And you go, there are 4 companies that control like 90%. And this is where, again, competition matters. And this is where conservatives, my conservative friends, remember when you used to believe in competition? Remember that? Come on, come back with me in the way back machine. Come on. You used to believe in that. You used to preach about competition, how we needed that in the economy and it was good for us. Only now you're kind of the monopolistic folks because you're on the team. You bought the hat, you got the shirt. Maybe we start thinking a little bit differently, especially those of us in the working class, when you start looking at the numbers. I think kind of important. I was looking at some Federal Reserve numbers because I want to talk a little bit about the Federal Reserve. And we're at an interesting point because we got a Federal Reserve that wants to slam on the brakes because rich people, they're afraid of you and me. They're afraid of working class people having a little bit of security, a little bit of wealth. And I came across this graph that they had in the One Fed report that shows that the bottom 50% of us, real net household wealth, is at an all-time record high. Bottom 50% of us average about $67,000 in wealth. That is, well above the $8,000 it was back in 2011. And has skyrocketed during the Biden years. In fact, has gone up 60% since the beginning of Biden's term, which means that the policies that they're moving on, the things that they're doing to help working class people is what? It's working. It's working. Which is why last week we were talking about, the Fed, Jerome Powell, basically slamming on the brakes, and what we know is coming is a massive recession. And they're honest about this. He did an interview not too long ago, and one of the people asked the question, how long is it going to take? How much economic pain should we prepare for? And the chairman said, how long? Well, he says, it really depends on how long it takes for wages and, more than that, prices to come down, for inflation to come down. He's basically saying, well, we've got to depress your wages. We've got to make you work for less, which means we've got to crush those unions, which means we've got to crush worker power, and we've got to make people desperate again. This is what he's saying. This other guy, Michael McKay, asks if 1.3 million jobs being lost, if that's acceptable. And Powell's response is, we're never going to say that it's too many people working, but the real point is that inflation, what we hear from people when we meet them is that they're really suffering from inflation. And if we want to set ourselves up really light the other period of a very strong labor market, we have got to get inflation behind us. He says, I wish there were a painless way to do that. There isn't. So what we need to do, get rates up to the point where we're putting meaningful downward pressure on inflation. And that's what we're doing. And what is inflation? That's you. That's wages. Meaningful pressure downward on your wages. And this is where you go, corporate profits are really high. We've got a wealth class that's doing really well. How come we don't hear the Fed asking them to help? And I go back to what Biden said at the beginning. I go back to that in the minute. His focus is on working class people, on the middle class, on the people who get up every day and punch a clock and go to work and support their families, because they're the ones who get hurt the most. That is a refreshing departure from the reality of virtually every working day of my life. As we have been under this neoliberal kind of push of using the Fed to, well, cause inflation when working people do a little bit better. You look at the reality. The reality is policies are working, making lives better. Wealth class can't have that. They want people desperate, pliable, working, happy to have jobs, just happy to have those crummy jobs. Powerless. Question is that what you want? And this election is about, do we continue on a course that's moving us in a positive direction? Or, well, do we give in and go back to the neoliberal supply side voodoo Reaganomic, give the rich people everything they want in the hope that their pocket's full and we get to scurry and fight over the crumbs? That's the question. So we can play the red hat, blue hat game. We can fight over who's wearing which t-shirt, or we can look upward and go, yeah, it's those corporate boardrooms. That's where we should be putting our effort. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Watch football all season long, live and cable-free. With YouTube TV, try it free.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
So looking forward to Wednesday. Yes, another episode of the January 6th committee hearings. I think, what is it, 7, 8? They're billing this as potentially the final episode. And I'm like, this kind of could be like the Who, their final farewell tour that I went to back in '89 and have seen the farewell tour. Oh, I don't know. I just took my son to see the Who not too long ago. Fortunately, they didn't bill it as a farewell tour, just kind of, the next bit. I guess they've given up on that. But the good thing is maybe we're going to get some more information. They're going to be using some clips from Roger Stone's movie where he's saying, look, there's going to be violence, that we're going to have, armed people there, and, basically laying out months before January 6th what actually happened. Kind of premeditated thinking stuff. But here to share some thoughts on Wednesday's January 6th hearing, I've asked Peter Montgomery to come talk with us. Peter is a senior fellow over at People for the American Way. They run the Right Wing Watch group, rightwingwatch.org, the website, if you want to check out the incredible work that they do. Peter, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks to be here. Best miniseries since Game of Thrones. This hearings.
So what are we looking forward to? I mean, is this this is where we kind of wrap it all together? Is just another piece, another brick in the wall? What are we looking for?
I think the fact that this might be the last hearing before they actually, stop and work on putting together their final written report means that they're just going to really they're going to make the case. I think he laid out, they're going to just try to make the case again. I mean, they've already made it. They're just going to make the case again. just how bad this was, that this was a criminal conspiracy that involved Trump, that involved Trump's lawyers, campaign people, allies, all conspiring to overturn the election, whatever way they could. And this committee has generated so much information, just hundreds of thousands of emails and texts and documents. It's really been an extraordinary amount of work, and this is their chance, I think, to put the case to the public one more time in the most compelling way they can.
No, I'm looking forward to the possibilities of there being some accountability in all this, and this is where, all these hearings, aside, eventually there has to be some accountability, because what happened on January 6th can never happen again. And I want those people who plotted, planned, schemed, and carried this out, I want them held accountable. Even if that rises to the, and I know everyone wants Trump to be in the orange suit picking up trash on the side of the road, but I want to make sure that people are held accountable.
Well, that's absolutely right. If people aren't held accountable, it's going to happen again. People have said historically, an unsuccessful coup, if the people are not held accountable, is just a practice run. They'll try it again. And we know in some ways they're already planning to try again. Trump and Bannon have their minions running for Secretary of State. They're running for office as local election officials. So they'll have their people in place to try to pull off the shenanigans that they tried to force election officials to do this last time. So that's really troubling. Yeah, but truth telling is the first step to accountability. And the only, we'd never even have a chance at accountability if Republicans, held the House right now. If they had been able to block the creation of this investigative committee, they would have buried the truth about what happened so deep that we'd never find it. So this has really been an amazing public service to unearth all this and show it to us, to show it to the public.
And that's, again, why I think this election is so important as well, because, if Republicans take the House, this all gets swept under the rug.
They've made that very clear. They're going to shut down any investigation of Trump. They're going to shut down an investigation of January 6th, and they'll use their power to harass the Biden administration and to go after, to try to make, Americans care about Hunter's laptop.
Because there are, like a whole series of laptops out there, as I understand. In fact, ones that he may never even touched.
Well, they've made it clear that they really will stop any effort to hold Trump accountable. They'll stop any effort to get more of the truth out to the American public. I think that's why, the committee has been working so hard, because they know that they've got to tell us what they have to tell us by the end of the year. Because if Republicans take the House, we're not going to learn any more from them. And so I think there's going to be a blockbuster written report that this committee is going to put out, probably very close to the end of the year, just massively documenting everything that they have told us at the public hearings, and way more that they just haven't. There's just no time to tell in a public hearing. It's going to be something extraordinary, I think.
So, what do you say to the people, Peter, who go, this close to the election, this shouldn't be going on now because this is just purely political at this point? What's the argument there?
Well, the argument is we almost had our election overthrown. We almost had our democracy upended. And we need to know the truth about that. And we need to know the truth. I'd say it's even more important to know the truth before the elections because, as you said, it makes the stakes very clear. It makes the stakes of, we have one party that, with very few exceptions, is in lockstep with Trump, is in lockstep against accountability, is trying to downplay the importance of what happened, trying to make people forget what they saw with their own eyes. This mob attacking Capitol Police, dragging on the steps, stabbing them with flagpoles, beating them, bashing the windows in, trashing the Capitol. We all saw it, and yet they're trying to downplay it, pretend it wasn't happening. These were just, peaceful protesters. Uh, they really don't want the truth to come out, and so I think, the fact that it's close to the election is great. Um, Unfortunately, a lot of the Trump and MAGA supporters aren't going to watch because they don't want to know. They don't want to know the truth. They're like the la 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 la. Uh, but a lot of people are. A lot of Americans have watched the hearings, and I think there's some evidence that there's a good chunk of independents who take the insurrection more seriously because of what the hearings have shown us. And I think the combination of the hearings and the investigations in New York and the FBI, we've seen Trump's uh, numbers slipping down and the number of people who wanted to run again slipping down. And so I think um, this is all having an impact. And it's not, unfortunately, there hasn't been a huge group of Trump people seeing the scales fall from their eyes with the hearings. But I do think that this sort of steady presentation of the truth, of the really disturbing truth, is having an impact.
Yeah, no, I think you'd agree with me that all of these investigations are just highlighting all of the criming that went on during his tenure. But some of my MAGA friends, some of my Trump supporter friends are going, "This is just piling on. This is just all political. It's a witch hunt, Peter. It's all a witch hunt. It's all just going after poor Donald." But the reality is you look at what's going on in Georgia, you look at what's going on in New York, you look at this this January 6th committee. There's just so much that I don't know how you can just ignore what is so much.
Yeah, I mean, that's really when you have to look at this as a cult of personality, right? I mean, this is why charismatic con men are dangerous because they're con men. They're great at manipulating people, at getting people to believe them. When you add to that this right wing movement that has spent years telling people, don't trust the media, don't trust the mainstream media, only trust Fox News, only trust conservative media outlets. So they've created this bubble, and Trump is really great at playing on that, and you know getting people to believe he's their guy, he's in their corner, and unfortunately, that means a lot of them are willing to um, accept whatever he does, and that's dangerous.
It's
It's
scary.
dangerous for democracy, and I think it's why. Um, uh, as much as I disagree with their politics, I say that we really owe a debt of gratitude to Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger because they have uh, stood up against Trump. They have said democracy is more important than the power of the Republican Party, and they've sacrificed their own careers because the Republican Party's base is so loyal to Trump that they've had to sacrifice their careers to stand with the truth. And so um, I think that's been a real sign of political courage.
Yeah, and what does that say about the Republican Party? That's the other part of this. You listen to the Rick Smith Show, where we're here with Peter Montgomery, senior fellow at People for the American Way. Check out their website, people4.org, I believe, right?
Yes, and rightwingwatch.org. Yep.
We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Now, I understand Robin Voss, the Speaker of the Wisconsin House, was subpoenaed, supposed to testify today, 10 a.m. Filed a lawsuit that didn't happen. It's remarkable to me that if I'm called to testify, my butt's going to be in that chair. But we get so many of these people who, subpoenas don't seem to mean the same thing to folks in the higher rarefied era that they mean to us common folk. I think someone like Voss should have to testify about his phone call with Trump back in July. We need to know if our president's a crook or not. I think that's simple.
Well, absolutely, and it's a sign of just how much he has poisoned the party. because all these people, if I'm sure if you go to their websites, listen to campaigns, they all run as, law and order, rule of law guys. But then, when law and order comes knocking at their door, they slam it shut. They run away. They don't, these are legal subpoenas. These are things that they are legally required to respond to. And, they blow them off.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? To your point right there, isn't it amazing that the law and order people are the ones who are now saying we need to defund the FBI and all
Right.
of all of that stuff? And I'm going, did I wake up from a dream and the narrative flipped? When did that happen?
It happened when they decided to put Trump over everything else. And they got convinced that all the investigations of Trump were fake news and politics. And they believed what Trump started railing about his enemies in the deep state. There's just been a relentless propaganda campaign from the right to tell people that poor Trump is the victim of all these bad people who are out to get him, including the people in the FBI and the Justice Department. But you're absolutely right. It's stunning to see all these law and order people who, back the blue, who are siding with the insurrectionists, who sent 140 members of the Capitol Police to the hospital, or who injured that many of them, who are now siding with people who are just defying the law and refusing legal subpoenas. Bannon got held in criminal contempt. I'm hoping that others who are defying subpoenas are going to face the same thing.
I'm hoping they build a special wing off of one of the more moderate jails. These aren't people who can do real time, but take them off the golf courses. At least give them orange suits. Let them pick up trash on the side of the highway. Make them a little bit useful. So, last question I've got for you: the hearing Wednesday. What are we told is the focus, and what should we be paying attention to?
I think they've been a little bit mum. Sometimes they've made it very clear in advance who's going to be testifying and who the focus is. They've kept this one a little closer to the vest, but I think I would say look for new insider information. The last couple hearings, the big bombshells have been people from inside the administration who've come forward with new truth. So I'm guessing there's going to be some more truth from inside the White House, from inside of Team Trump. There have been some more, they've gotten their hands on more documents. And I think I would look to, let's hear what the committee's going to say about criminal referrals. The committee can't charge people, but they can make criminal referrals to the Justice Department. And I am fully expecting them to make a lot of criminal referrals to the Justice Department. And hopefully they'll talk about that some.
I know I will have my bowl of popcorn and be ready for Wednesday, hoping for those criminal referrals and waiting for that element of surprise. I'm waiting for one of the inner circle to be the Exhibit A witness, surprise witness, maybe Ivanka. Who knows?
That would be some news.
That would be fun. But Peter, I appreciate the time. As always, appreciate the expertise and the insight. Good stuff, man.
Thanks for what you do.
I appreciate it. Our good friend Peter Montgomery. Make sure you check out their website, rightwingwatch.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. Where working people come to talk.
The best way to strengthen America's economy? How about investing in America's fastest growing industry, clean energy? We're talking jobs, millions of them, the type that pay well and can't be outsourced. Because the thing about clean energy, it's all right here, American made.
When the stakes are high at work, your tone matters. Grammarly's advanced tone suggestions can help. Because when you write with just the right confident tone, you can meet any challenge to move your project forward. Grammarly's advanced tone suggestions can help you find just the right positive tone to close that important deal. Yes, getting the tone just right can help move your project forward. Write it just right. Click the blue button to download Grammarly today.
It means lower utility costs for families, and it's how we take on climate change. An investment in clean energy is a big win. Congress, let's get it done.
I took 2 years of electric in high school, and I was the only girl in the class there. Here, I'm the only girl as far as installers go. I'm a single mom, too. I joined the union because it gave me options for health care and life insurance so that I know my son's taken care of. I like what I do. Like, this is the best job I've ever had. You think solar panels is more like California. You wouldn't think Appalachia would have any. It would be smart if the government would invest more in clean energy resources.
So much of what we see, hear, read, owned by corporate special interests, the corporate-controlled media, and we're told that there's this liberal-conservative divide, even though I would argue our corporate-controlled media, very conservative, pushing that message of division, pushing that message of government is bad, corporation's good, so that corporate control can rule the day. And we get so much disinformation. We get so much, what we used to call BS back in the day. But today we got a nice word. It's called disinformation, misinformation. How do we filter through it all? Well, I've got my next guest going to help us figure out how we work through, how we filter the garbage and come up with good information. That's why I've asked Kate Bissett to come talk with us. She's the content organizing director over at Courier Newsroom, couriernewsroom.com, the website. They've got a new program coming out I'm very excited about. Kate, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So we see this a lot. I mean, there's a lot of, what I used to call back in the old days when I was not on FCC, radio, bull. It's just bull. Yeah.
I do.
How do we detect the giant steaming smelly pile of bull?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And I think it's one that obviously the fate of democracy at this point is starting to hang on as we see more and more pushes of disinformation and less local news available to cut through for communities. I can tell you, Rick, that for 20 years I was a community journalist in northern Michigan. And so I know that as we've lost, more than 1,500 papers across the country in the last decade, and so many more have been consolidated in conglomerates, we've lost that local voice that was kind of the bull detector, right? Because we were able to have journalists who lived in the communities where they were reporting, connecting the dots between policies and policymakers and everyday life and impact at a hyperlocal and a state level that was able to keep civil discourse, keep civic engagement going. And without that, we've made this vacuum of space for really bad actors to come in and take advantage of people that maybe don't have as much local news availability, that might not ever pay a paywall, because those media outlets that do still exist, that are trying hard to bring journalistic integrity or keep journalistic integrity in their communities, are often behind a paywall. And most Americans, frankly, aren't paying for news that way. So at Courier Newsroom, we're doing a couple of really interesting and exciting things. One, we're a social first network, which means we're meeting people where the disinformation lives most, which is online and in social media spaces. And we have 8 newsrooms across the country with journalists who live and work and are in community in their states. So they have a real invested interest in seeing impact and personal humanized stories being told to help reconnect those dots.
Right.
But we have to do more than just share good information and assume. I think back in the day, journalists would say, if you tell a relevant story and you tell it well, your readers will find you, right? That's how I always existed. It was kind of our hubris, frankly, that I think partly got us into this mess. Because we know that that's not the way algorithms work. They don't really
not in this
care.
day and age. And
that's
look,
right.
And look, the internet has done this. The costs have done this, and you brought up the costs. When I was a kid, the newspaper, and I'm going to sound really old, but it was like a quarter. And most people, you picked it up. Now you go, it's a real investment in getting the newspaper, especially if delivered to your home. My first job as an 8-year-old was delivering the Cleveland Press in the evenings. And everybody got it, even in poor neighborhoods, because that's how you got your information. And it was tested. It was made to be somewhat accurate. Now people are getting stuff from who knows where. Joe in his basement's making a site that looks somewhat decent, throwing out giant steaming piles of nonsense, and that somehow is passing off as news. And look what it's doing to us.
That's right. You are exactly right. It was the same thing where I grew up. Everybody got the evening paper. People were able to turn on their trusted radio stations, right? Even that, or their news, and you'd get Walter Cronkite. You'd get the news. It wasn't this like divided, hyper partisan situation where there are like bad actors and extremists that are masking themselves as news now, looking to create wedges and distrust in all of our institutions, right? We see it in schools, we see it in health, we see it in government, we see it at like hyper local levels, at state levels, and at federal levels. So one of the ways that we're trying to fight back against this is to build a grassroots movement of good info messengers, people that we can train to learn how to use their social media platforms and empower them to take advantage of the power that we all still do have to share that good information out into the world. So what that looks like for us is, providing trainings and kind of continuing education for folks on how to spot disinfo. That's important. Connecting people with organizations that are working to debunk disinfo. But then for our sort of sweet spot, we're also training people how to go on the offense, because this is the one thing that we have seen a hole in this disinformation war. There's lots of really great people out there doing work to debunk things as they happen. But there's not a big concerted effort yet on sharing and blanketing these spaces with good information, right? This is what, there are certain bad actors that are, I don't even like to say their names, that have made a real industry for themselves in disinformation. Yeah. And they will say, it doesn't matter if it's true, you just have to flood the space.
No, and this is where, if it gets repeated enough, it actually becomes then true.
That's right.
This is the problem with the algorithms, as you've pointed out, because I can't tell you how many people have come to me and said, I read this on the internet, and go, well, of course, if you read it on the internet, it's got to be true.
Must be true.
And the reality is it's not.
It's not. And part of the problem is that the stuff that's getting spread and shared and reacted to in a way that the algorithms will pick it up is that disinformation. And we know, particularly for folks who are only getting their news on social media, who are not like actively going to pay a paywall, or not actively seeking that information out, if that's all they see, it starts to, exactly like what you said, it starts to become true in their brains, even if that's not what they thought before they were seeing it over and over and over again. So we want to train people to reclaim that power of being a trusted messenger in their community, take on that role that their local newspapers used to play in being able to provide that constant visual for people of things that are true and relevant and factual and important in connecting the dots for folks, reminding people like what actually happens with a local policy that impacts them as a person, why they should care about civic engagement in general, and doing that through news content. So we're training folks on how to share that information, how to have those conversations online, how to work within the algorithm system to do everything we can to lift up news content, both our newsroom content in our 8 states, and also the content of mission-aligned organizations who are in those communities doing really important work day in and day out that might not have the bandwidth or the capacity or the resources to get their message out online as well.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show with Kate Bissett. She's the content organizing director at Courier Newsroom. Check out their website, couriernewsroom.com, and you can find all of the 8 local newsrooms right there at Courier Newsroom. I know where I'm at. You've got the Keystone Part of it right here. I know there are a number of states. They've got one in Wisconsin that we're going to be talking with folks there as well. All across the country, there are places. But here's the thing, Kate, and understand. And I think the hard part of what you're talking about is this is hard work. It's easy to make stuff up. It's easy to create a bunch of BS. It's hard to be factual. It's hard to be accurate. And, this is why, local journalism has struggled because the money hasn't been there. You've had these big, hedge funds and these big moneyed interests who've come in and just devastated local newspapers for their own profit. All of this stuff has just been kind of the perfect storm of the end of democracy. How much are we talking about in the way of a heavy lift for the average person to do what you're asking? Because it sounds to me like this could be a lot of work.
Well, the good news is a couple of things. It's a lot of work on the back end, right? It's a lot of work building the infrastructure. It's a lot of work for our journalists to go out and tell the stories that matter to people and that will resonate with people and that drive that local connection forward. But for our volunteers, we're making it as light of a load as possible and really believing that it's the community weaving together that's going to make the lift light. So one person can go in and do less than 5 minutes of work in a week on their social media platforms by sharing relevant content, by interacting with news that in a way that we know will lift it up in people's news feeds through the algorithms, by inviting